Today's tale in Ancient Irish Tales is the fate of the children of Tuirenn, and this is from the stories of the Tuatha de Danna. Again, this is the fate of the children of Tuirenn. The fate of the children of Tuirenn is one of a group of narratives known as in the Irish tradition as the three sorrows of storytelling. The others being the exile of the sons of Ustan, which we'll get to later, and the fate of the children of Lear. The first part of the story, telling of how Nuda got his silver arm and how the Fomorians came to invade Ireland, merely serves as an introduction, as it only superficial connection with the main plot, which is concerned with the desperate attempts of the sons of Tuirenn to carry out the impossible task imposed upon them by Lugh as the blood price for his father, who, like the other major personages, is of the Tuatha de Danna. The narrative contains numerous references to the Book of Invasions and the Second Battle of Moratoria, which we've covered in the two previous videos. The tale, although it details events of the remote past, is comparatively late in date, contrasted with the earlier and sterner pieces that compose the Ulster cycle. It may appear somewhat overwrought and undoubtedly burdened with romantic incidents, yet it builds up to the conclusion of a full tragic pathos. A commonly freeborn king took sovereignty to rule over the beautifully complexioned Tuatha de Danna. His name was Nuda Augam, that is Nuda Silverarm, the son of Itrach, and the son of Irlam, the son of Oren, the son of Uranen. And that king was remarkable for two things. He had an arm of silver, which is remarkable in itself, and he had for a doorkeeper a young man, but with one eye. Now that it happened that one day this young man went beyond the walls of Tara, he saw two beautiful, noble-faced youths coming over the green towards him. They saluted him, and he saluted them in return. And the doorkeeper asked news of them. "What place have ye come from, ye two noble-faced youths?" "We are good doctors," they say. "If ye are good doctors," he said, "ye will put an eye in the place of my lost eye." "I couldn't put the eye that of a cat in your lap and place it in your eye," said one of them. "I should like that well," said the doorkeeper. And so they put the cat's eye into the place of the young man's lost eye. This turned out to be convenience and an inconvenience for him. For when he wished to sleep or take rest, then the eye would start at the squeaking of a mouse, and the flying of birds, and the motion of the rushes. And when he wished to watch a host for an assembly, it was then that surely deep in repose and sleep with him. However, he went in and told the king that excellent doctors had come to Tara, for they put a cat's eye in place of my eye, he said. "Bring them in," said the king. And as they came in and heard deep pitches groan, then Miach, one of the doctors, said, "I hear the groan of a champion." Umrach, the other, said, "See if it is not the groan of a champion, or a chaffer which is blackening him on the side." Then the king was brought forward from where he was, and they examined him. And one of them drew his arm out from his side, and the chaffer darted out of it, and ran through the court. And the household arose and killed the chaffer. And Miach made another arm, this of the same length and thickness for him, and all the Tuatha de Danna were sought, and no arm was found that would serve him but the arm of Mudan, the swineherd. With the bones of his own arm are ye the arm of his very man, serve you, said the people. It is what we should prefer, they said, and the person was sent to fetch it, and brought it with him to Tuatha, and it was given to Miach. Miach said to Ormish, how do you wish to set the arm, or to go bring herbs for the purpose of putting flesh upon it? I prefer to set the arm, he said. Miach then went to seek the herbs and returned without them. But the arm was set without deficit. The state of things in the time of this king was this. The Fomorians enforced a great tribute and rule over the Tuatha De Danna. In this time, such a tribute upon the kneading dough, and a tribute upon the quorum, and a tribute upon the baking flags, and the poll tax, calculated at an ounce of gold for every nose of the Tuatha De Danna on the hill of Unshin, on the west side of Tara, and they extorted this tribute every year. And if any man neglected to pay, his nose was taken off his face. At this time, a fair assembly was held by the king of Tuirenn, Borro's hill, now which is called Unstic. And the people had not long before assembled there, before they saw an array of godly army coming over the plain to the east towards them. And one young man came in front of that army, high in command over the rest, and, like to the setting sun, was a splendor of his countenance and his forehead. And they were not able to look upon his face from the greatness of his splendor. And he was Lulamufta, or Lu of the long arm. And his army was of the fairy mounds and from the land of promise, Fairyland. And his own foster brothers, the son Manon, named Soragel, son of Manon, and Ruibersinton, and Gerogorb, and Gonokursnich, and Sigan Singer, and Domrodunud, and Edris, son of Ilnith. And thus was the personal array of Lu. Namely, they seared Emperor of Merin, and was under him, and she was as the fleet as the naked cold wind of spring, and the sea and land were the same to her, and the charm was such that her rider was never killed off her back. And he wore Manon's corset upon him, and its charm was such that no one could be wounded below it or above it. And he wore Manon's breastplate upon the ridge of his breast and the front, so that no weapon could pierce him. And he had a helmet on his head to protect it, with a beautiful peerless stone behind it, and the two of them in front. And as bright as the sun on the dry summer's day was the complexion of his face and forehead when he took the helmet off, that he furga Ritter Manon's sword at his side, and its charm was such that it would never wound anyone who could come away alive from it. And that sword was never barred in the scene of battle or combat in which so much strength as that of a woman in childbirth could remain to any person who saw the sword who opposed to it. Then came that array to where the king of Era was, the Tuatha Day, and they exchanged welcomes. And they were not long before they saw the gloomy, grim-looking body of men coming towards him, namely 9 times 9 of the collectors of the Fomorians, who were coming to demand taxes and tributes of the men of the Iri. The following are the names of the fiercest, most cruel 4 of them: En, Ephra, Kron, and Kompera. And so great was the fear of the Tuatha De Danna of these collectors that not one of them dared inflict punishment even on his own son or his foster son. And they came into the presence of the king of Tuirenn, and fairly Cavclade, and the king of Tuirenn, and all the Tuatha De Danna stood before them. And Lu asked of the Tuatha De Danna, "Why do you stand up before the gloomy, grim-looking body of a man?" They have not stood up before us. We are obliged to do this, said the king of Erin. For if they were but a month-old child for us sitting before them, they would not deem it cause too little to kill us. By my word, said Lu, I feel a great desire to kill them. And then Lu said again that the desire to kill them came strongly upon him. That would be a deed and bring evil to us, said the king of Erin. For if we should meet our own death and destruction through it, it is not long that ye have been under this. It is a long time that ye have been under this oppression, said Lu. And he started up and attacked the Fomorians, slaughtering and disfiguring them, until he had killed 8 times 9 of them. But the remaining 9 he allowed to receive sanctuary under the dignity and protection of the king of Erin. I should kill you also, said Lu, but that I prefer that you should go with the news to the foreigners rather than my own messengers, lest they should receive dishonor. And then these 9 went forth until they reached the country of Lochan, where the Fomorian people were. And they related to them their story from beginning to end, and how the young noble-faced boy had come into Erin, and all the collectors had been killed by him, but themselves. And they said the reason that he allowed us to escape was in order that we might relate the story to you. Thereupon Balor, king of the Fomorians, said, Do you know who he is? I know, said Tuirenn, Balor's wife. He is a daughter's son of yours and mine. And his prestige prophesied for us that from the time that he should come into Erin, that we would never again have power there. And then the chief of the men of Fomorians went into council. Nerain Ab, the grandson of Neat, and Scarab, grandson of Neat, and Skolra and Lochan, and 10 more of Transdale, and Logan Nosham, and Letlushan, and Lobus the Druid, and Lester son of Lobers, and the 9 deeply learned poets, and prophetic prophesiers of the Fomorians, and Balor the scout of blows himself, and the 12 white-mouthed sons of Balor, and Kraken and Crooked Tooth, Balor's queen. And it was then Brees, the son of Balor, said, I shall go with 7 vigilant and great battalions of horsemen of the Fomorians into Erin, and I shall give battle to Lu, and I shall cut off his head and bring it to you upon the green of Lochnisbraid. I would be well welcome to become to do so, they said. And Brees said, Let my ships and ships and swift barks be made ready for me, and let food and stores be put in them. And then they quickly and actively handed his ships and quick barks, and they put an abundance of food and drink into them. And Lachneth and Lochlorum were sent to assemble his army to him. And when they all been assembled together, they prepared their habiliments and their armor and their weapons of valor, and set out forward towards Erin. And Balor followed them to the port, and he said, Give battle to Lu, and cut off his head, and tie that island, which is called Erin, that the sterns of your ships and your good barks, and let your dense verge waters take its place, and place it upon the north side of Lochan, and not one of the Tuatha De Danna will ever follow it there. And then they pushed out their ships and swift barks in the port, and they filled with them pitch, and with frankincense, and with myrrh, and they hoisted the siding variant sailing cloths. And they made a sudden start from the harbour, and the shore port along the land that is not cultivated, and out upon the way-lying sea, and upon the wonderful abyss, and upon the ridge-backs of the flood, and upon the wet, high, cold, venomed mountains, and the truly deep ocean. And they never slackened from that sailing course until they reached harbour and shore at the port of Isdara. He who was king of Corbrook at that time was Bob Durg's son of the Dagda. And Lu was at that time in Tara, along with the king of Erin, and it was revealed to him that the Fomorians had landed at Estars. And upon Lu's receiving the information, he paired McClellan's steed Erbiner at the junction of the day and night, and he went into where the king of the Erin was, and told him that the foreigners had landed at Istara, and they plundered Bogdurg, and he said, I am duress to gain assistance from you, to give them battle. I shall not give it, said the king of Erin. For a deed that has not been done against me, I shall not go to avenge. Now, when Lu heard this evil answer, he went on horseback and rode from Tara westwards. And soon as he perceived 3 warriors armed and accounted approached him, these were the 3 sons of Tuatha, and they saluted him. Why is thy early rising? They said. Great is my cause, said Lu, namely that the foreigners have come to Erin, and have plundered Bogdurg, the son of the Dagda. And what assistance will you give me? We will, they said, ward off 100 warriors, each man of us, from thee in battle. That's a good help, said he, but there is help which I should prefer to receive from you. Even rather than that, namely to assemble the men of the fairy mounds to me, from all the places which they are. And then Cuan Keaton went south, and Cian set out northwards, and he rested not until he reached Magmorcan. And he was traversing the plain. It was not long before he saw 3 warriors, armed and mailed before him, walking on the plain. And these were the 3 sons of Tuirenn, whose names were Brian, Ishtaba, and Ishtar. The state of things between the 3 sons of Tuirenn and the 3 sons of Tuirenn was that they were in hatred and enmity towards each other, so that whatever they met each other, it was impossible to avoid a deadly contest. Such only the strongest should survive it. Then Karen said, if my 2 brothers had been here, what a brave fight we should make. But since they are not, it is a good counsel for me to retreat. And he perceived a large herd of swine near him, and he struck himself with a druidic wand into the form of a pig of the herd. And then he began to root up the ground like every one of the other pigs. And then Brian, the son of Tuirenn, said, my brethren, have you seen the warrior who was walking the plain a while ago? We have seen him, he said. What has taken him away? He said. We know not. It's cowardice in you, he said, not to exercise proper vigilance in a time of war over the plains and open country. And I know what has carried him away, for he has stricken himself with a golden wand in the form of one of those pigs. And he is rooting up the ground like any pig, but he is no friend of ours. This is bad for us, said the other 2, for the pigs belong to someone of the Tuatha de Danna, and if we kill them all at all, it may happen that the druidic pig might escape after all. Badly have you acquired your learning in the city of learning, said Brian. When you cannot distinguish a druidical beast from a natural beast, and as he was saying this, he struck his 2 brothers with the metamorphosing druidic wand, and he turned them into 2 excellent fleet hounds, upon which they howled impatiently upon the trail of the druidic pig. It was not long until the druidical pig fell out of the other pigs, and one other fled, but she alone, and she saw a wooded grove and made for it. And at her entering the wood, Brian gave cast of his spear at her, and it drove through the trunk of her chest. And the pig screamed and said, ill is the deed you have done, to have cast at me since ye have known me. Methinks that's a human language you have, said Brian. I am originally a human being, said he. I am Kin, the son of Tuatha. Give me quarter. Oh, we shall indeed, said Loch-Ranishbar, and we regret what has happened to thee. I swear by my aerial gods, said Brian, that if the life returned 7 times to thee, I should deprive thee of it. Well then, said Ken, grant me a request. We shall grant it, said Brian. Allow me to pass into my own shape, said Ken. We shall allow it, said Brian, for I often feel less reluctant to kill a man than a pig. And Ken then assumed his own shape and said, give me mainly quarter now. We shall not give it, said Brian. Well then, I have deceived you, said Ken, for if this has been in the shape of a pig you had killed me, there could be but the fine of a pig paid for me. But as it is in my own shape, I shall be killed a noble person. There's never was killed and never will be killed a person for whom a greater fine shall be paid than me, and the weapons with which I shall be slain shall recount the deed to my son. It is not with arms you shall be slain, but with the surface of the stones of the earth, said Brian. And after that they pelted him in many ways with stone, fiercely and roughly, till they reduced the champion into an insignificant crushed mass. And then they buried him in a man's height in the earth. And the earth did not receive that fractured from them, but cast him above the surface of the earth again. Brian said that it should go again into the earth, and was buried again a second time. And the earth again did not receive him. In short, the children of Tuirenn buried the body 6 different times, and the earth rejected it. And the 7th time they put him under the ground, and mound received him. And the children of the Tuirenn went forward after Lu Longarm towards the battle, to return to Lu upon parting with his father Kin. He went forward from Tara westward, and to a lone MacLurgan, and Brunnen in Harbra, which is now called Roscommon, and over Morglaugan to Corgslibi and Surus, and to the head of Shin-Slibe, which is now Seaskoran, and through the territory at the bright-faced Coran, from that Moragmor and of the assembly where the foreigners were, and the spoils of Connacht in their hands. Then arose Brees, son of Balor, and he said, It is a wonder to me that the sun should rise in the west today, and in the east every other day. It were better that it were so, said the Druids. What else is it, he said. The radiance of the face of Lu Longarm, said they, and Lu came to them and saluted them. What is the cause of thy salvation, they said. Great is the cause of my saluting you, he said. For there is one half of my belongings of the Tuatha de Danna, and the other half of me, and therefore restore to me the milch cows of the men of the Erin. May early good luck not come to thee, said the man of the Erin, quietly, variantly answering him, until you obtain dry or a milch cow here. And then Lu cast a juridical spell upon the cattle spoils, and sent its milch cows home to the door of every house in Erin. And he left them the dry ones, so that they should not leave that territory until the men of the ferry mount should o'ertake them. And Lu remained 3 days and 3 nights about them, until the men of the ferry mounts came and sat around Lu. And Bolturuk, son of the Dagda, came with 2,900 men to him, and said, What is the cause of your delay from giving battle? Waiting for you, said Lu. Lu then put on Manon's crescent, and its charm was such that the man upon whom it should never could not be wounded through it, or below it, or above it. He put on Manon's breastplate, the small of his neck, and he put on his helmet, which was called Kenbar, and his countenance had that radiance of the sun from the reflection of the helmet. He took up his black blue splendid collar, broad sheltering, chaffer-marked shield upon the arched slope of his back, and he took a shattery, truly handsome, closed-edged sword upon his left side. And he took his 2 wide-stoped, thick-handled, hard-venomed spears, which had been annulled in the blood of poisonous otters, and the king's chiefs of men of the air, and took their array of combat and battle upon them. And they raised pointed forests of spears over their heads. They made perfectly firm fences of their shields around them. And then they attacked Megmor of the assembly, and the foreigners responded to them, and they threw their wounding whistle spears at each other. After having shivered the sliver spears, they drew their bloodied-edged gold-crossed swords from their blue-bordered scabbards, and they commenced to strike each other from bravery, and the forest of broad flames rose above them from the poisons of these arms and the many-edged weapons of these brave men. And then Lugh saw the battle pen in which was Breece, son of Balor. And he attacked him fiercely and wrathfully, and he fell to striking these brave men until 200 champions of those bodyguards of the sons of Balor fell by him in his presence. And then Breece bound Lugh to give him quarter. "Grant me life," he said, "this time, and I will bring over the Fomorian race to you, to the battle of Mortor, and I will give you the sun and the moon, the sea and the land, and guarantee upon myself not to come and fight against you again, unless I lose all Fomorian race now." And upon these guarantees, Lugh gave him safety of his life. And then the Druids said that Lugh ought to grant them safety of their lives. He thought, "I give my word," said Lugh, "that if the entire Fomorian race had gone under your protection, they should not be destroyed by me." And then Breece, son of Balor, and the Druids went away to seek their own country. As regards Lugh, after the trophies of the victories of the battle, he perceived 2 of his friends and asked them if they'd seen his father in battle. "We've not," they said. "Could it be the Fomorians that had killed them?" said Lugh. "It was not," they said. "He lives not," said Lugh. "I give my word for it that neither food nor drink shall enter my mouth until I have received knowledge of what kind of death my father has met." And so Lugh, accompanied by the men of the fairy mounds, went forward until they reached the place which he and his father had parted from each other, and from that to the place where the father had gone to sharp in the shape of a pig upon recognizing the children of Tuirenn. And here the ground spoke to Lugh and said, "Great was the danger in which thy father was here, O Lugh, upon his seeing the children of Tuirenn, for he was forced to go into the shape of a pig. However, they killed him in his own shape." And Lugh told this to his champions, and he discovered the spots in which his father was. And he went to knowing it, ordered it to be dug up, and ordered that he should know why, in what way the children of Tuirenn had slain him. The body was raised out of the grave, and they fell to examine his wounds, and was found to be a litter of wounds, upon which Lugh said, "This is a murderous death, which the children of Tuirenn have inflicted upon my beloved father." And he kissed him thrice, and said, "All am I for his death, for I cannot hear anything through my ears, and I cannot see anything through my eyes. And there is not one pulse living in my heart for grief of my father, and yet gods whom I adore. I grieve that I was not present when this deed was perpetrated, and that it is a great deed that has been done here, namely, that the Tuatha de Danna have committed a fratricide upon one another, and long shall be its loss to them." And he spoke the following. A dreadful fate did Caton meet at evening. It was dismembered my body and mangled of the hero. The road sometime eastwards and sod for a time westwards. Erin shall never be but in evil. Through the killing of Ken, the champion accomplished feats. My vigor is overpowered. My face has become black. My senses have declined. His grave is laid low. The children of Tuirenn have killed him. Disabled shall be the Tuatha De Danna for this deed, in anguish of strength and debility. Then Cairn was placed under the mound again, and after that his tombstone was raised over his tomb, and his funeral games were held, and his name was written in Ogham. It was from Cairn this mound shall be named, said Lugh, and he spoke the following poem. From Cain shall this mound be named, through himself is now dismantled place. Great is the deed that has been perpetrated, a falsehood upon the Tuatha De Danna. The sons of Tuirenn it was that committed this deed, and I tell you truth. I say unto you, it is not false news. It shall fall upon their grand and great-grandsons. The 3 sons of Craig brave the company, and the children of Tuirenn, for this has come to the death of kin. That they were equally in high degree. Broken is my heart and my breast, since the champion of Cairn lives not. For the sons of Durek, this is no false tale, that they shall be cast into anguish. After this poem, Lugh said, I shall the Tuatha De Danna fare from this deed, and long shall falsehood continue to be perpetrated in Tuirenn after that. And pitiful is my condition from this deed, for which the children of Tuirenn were perpetrated, that he ordered his people, Go ye to Tara, where the king of Erin and the Tuatha De Danna are, he said, and do not divulge these things until I have divulged them myself. When Lugh reached Tara, he sat nobly and honorably at the shoulder of the king of Erin. And he looked upon him, and he saw the 3 sons of Tuirenn. And these were all the men and the 3 beast activities in the hand's feast. The most beautiful and most honored were in Tara at that time, and the best hand in the battle against the Fomorians. And then Lugh ordered the Cairn chain of action of the courts to be shaken, and so it was done, so that they listened. Lugh said, What is your attention now, O Tuatha De Danna? It is upon thee indeed, they said. A question I ask you nobly, he said. What would be the vengeance each of you would take upon him that should kill the father of each of you? A great astonishment seized upon every one of them hearing this, and the Cairn answered him first, and thus spoke he. We know it was not your father that has been killed. It is indeed, said Lugh. And I see in the house now the party that killed him, and they know themselves the way in which they killed him better than I. And the king Erin said, It is not the killing of one day, and myself would vast upon the person who should kill my father, but to cut one of its members off every day, one after the other, until he had fallen by me, should be in my power. All the nobles stood the same, and the children of Tuirenn like the rest. They're making this declaration, said Lugh, the 3 persons who have killed my father, and let them pay me compensation for him. Since the Tuatha De Danna are all but one in one house, and they do not, I shall not violate the law of the king of Erin, nor his sanctuary. However, they shall not attempt to leave Techmurga, house of mead circling, until they have settled with me. If I myself killed your father, said the king of Erin, I should deem it well that you accept compensation from me for him. It has towered us that Lugh says this, said the children of Tuirenn, And let us acknowledge the killing of his father to him, said Israel. For to seek the account of his father is remembered until now, until he has obtained the knowledge of his death. We may fear, said Brian, that it is in seeking an admission from us he is in the presence of all the rest, and that he would not accept compensation from us afterwards. We shall, said the other sons, admit to him, and do not give it openly, since you are the eldest. I will give it, said Brian. And with that Brian, the son of Tuirenn, said, It is towards us you say this, O Lu. These three of us, for we are whom you're supposed to before now to have risen in combat against the sons of Crete. And yet we have not killed your father, although we shall give compensation for him, the same if we had performed the deed. I shall receive compensation from you, though you do not think it, and I shall name it here, and if you think it is too great, you shall have remission or part of it. Let us hear from thee, they said. Here it is, Lu, said Lu. Namely, 3 apples, and the skin of a pig, and a spear, and 2 steeds, and a chariot, and 7 pigs, and a puppy dog, and a cooking spit, and 3 shouts upon a hill. That is the compensation for which I demand, said Lu. And if you think it's too great, part of it shall be remitted to you presently here. And if you do not think it's too great, pay it from you. We do not think it's too great, said Brian, son of Tuirenn, nor it's 200-fold as a compensation. We more suspect your having a treacherous and murderous design reserved for us, from its smallest as a fine. I do not deem I have named compensation as too little, said Lu. And I shall give you the guarantee of the Tuatha de Danna to ask no more and be faithful to you forever, and give you the same guarantee to me. This is a pity, said the children of Tuirenn, though for the guarantees of the world are not insufficient ourselves. I do think it too little, said Lu, for it is often your sort have promised to pay a fine in this way, and in the presence of all people, and would yet endeavor to go back on it. The children of Tuirenn then gave pledges to the king of Erin and Borros, son of the Dagda, and the nobles of the Tuatha de Danna, beside the guarantees of payment of that fine to Lu. It is better that I should now, said Lu, give you the knowledge of the compensation. It is better indeed, they said. Well then, said Lu, 3 apples from which I have demanded from you are the 3 apples of the garden of Hetepist in the east of the world, and no other apples but these will do for me, for these are the most gifted and beautiful apples in all the world. And the description of them is this: they are the color of burnished gold, and at the head of the mouth of the old child that is no longer than each apple's written on. And they have the taste of honey when eaten, and they heal the effects of bloody wounds or malignant disease or any person who eats part of them. And they are not diminished by constantly eaten forever. And every one who casts an apple of them performs by it whatever feat he desires. And it comes back to him again, and though brave ye be 3 champions, ye have not what I do not regret for your sakes, and the power to carry away these apples from the people who have them. Because it has been foretold of them that 3 young warriors from the west of Europe would go and deprive them by force. The pig skin now, which I demand of you, is the skin of the pig of Titus, the king of Greece. And it cures perfectly, heals all wounds and diseases person of the world, to be ever great danger, if only overtakes the life in them. And is such the nature that the pig that carry every stream of water through which it may pass be converted into wine for 9 days. And every wound in which it touched was healed, and the Druids of Greece told them that it was not the pig itself that had virtue, but the skin, and it had skinned, and that they had skinned ever since. I think it would not be easy to obtain it either without consent. And do ye know what spear It is I've demanded of you? We do not, they said. An excellent poisoned spear, in which Piercer, king of Persia, is possessed. Abdor, it's called, and every choicest deed is performed with it, and its blade is always in a cauldron of water, lest it melt down by its fury heat the city in which it is kept, and it is difficult to obtain it. And do you wish to know what steeds and chariot I wish to receive from you? We do not know, they said. There are 2 noble, wonderful steeds of the Dober, the king of Sicily, and such is their nature that sea and land are equally convenient to them, and there are no swifter or stronger steeds than they, and there is no chariot in equal goodness in form and firmness. And do you know which are the 7 pigs I have demanded from you? They are the pigs of Els, the king of the golden pillars, said Lu. And though they are killed every night, they are found alive the next day. And every person that eats part of them shall have not disease or ill health. And the ham whelp from which I demand of you is namely a whelp of the king of Ildred. And Fionus is her name, and all the wild beasts of the world that she should see, they would fall down out of their standing. She is more splendid than the sun in these fairy wheels, and it is difficult to obtain her. The cooking spit from which I demand of you is namely a spit of the spits of a woman in the ears of Ilsforkture. The 3 shouts which I have demanded of you are in the hymn, namely, give thee 3 shouts on Coromechan in the north of Locrum, and is prohibited to Mencan and his sons to suffer shouts to given upon that hill, as with that my father received his military education. And though I should forgive his death to you, they would not. And though you should succeed in all your adventures until you reach them, I am of the opinion that you would avenge his death upon you. And that is the compensation that I demand of you, said Lu. Silence and astonishment fell upon the children of Tuirenn, at the naming of his compensation, that they went to where their father was told them of their oppression. These are bad tidings, said Tuirenn, and ye shall have death and permanent destruction inflicted upon you in seeking for that fine, and it is just that it should happen to you. And notwithstanding that if Lu himself wished it, ye could work out compensation, and the men would not procure it without the powers of Manamik or Lu. Therefore, go and ask Lu of Loin of Marin Seed and Alberner. If he expects you to obtain the fine, he will give you the steed. And if he does not accept it, you would give her to you. He would not give her to you, but then he will say this, that she does not belong to him and cannot give and loan away. And then he's asked for the loan of Marinconch, and said that the severer will not give you that. It's taboo for him to give the second request upon him. The curse is better for you than the steed. And then children of Tuatha went to Lu and was saluted by him, and they said he could not procure the compensation without his own assistance, and they should like for that reason for him to get Lone Maker's horse, Alberner. I have not that steed myself, said Lu, but upon a loan, and I shall not give you the loan of the loan away. If so, you give us the loan of Corach, said Brian, son of Tuirenn. I shall give it. What place is it in? At Borgnabon, said Lu. And they came again to where Tuirenn was, and Uthran, daughter of Tuirenn, their sister, and told them that they have obtained the crutch. That is not, you will be better obtaining it, he said. However, Lu is disastrous and have every part of this compensation that will be available for him against the battle of Merctora to be brought to him, and which will not be available to him, that is yourselves. He will be very glad that you should fall in his last sinking it. And they set forward and left Tuirenn in sorrow and lamentation, and Eanna accompanied him to the port which Conch was. And Brian set into Conch and said, "There's room for but one other person along with me here." And he began to grumble at its narrowness. "It's prohibited to the Conch to grumble in that way," said Ethan. "And, my beloved brothers, this was lamentable deed you committed, to kill the father of Lugh, and every evil what that comes to you in consequence of it, but just." She made this lay. "Lamentable the deed that you have committed, your generous fair-haired youth, the father of Lugh of the long arm, to kill is in my mind indeed an evil." "O Tuirenn, do not say so," they responded. "Active is our cheerfulness, brave our deeds. We prefer 100 times to be killed than to die like unheroic cowards." "Search ye the lands and islands," she said, "till you reach the borders of the Red Sea, then drive you out of Erin, alas. There's not a deed more lamentable." After these words, these warriors' band pushed the crunch out from the beautiful, clear, bayed borders of Erin. "What course shall we now first take?" they said. "We should go seek the apples," said Brian,
Motion detected at the blink doorbell.
"as they were the first that was demanded of us. Accordingly we ask thee, thou Cross of Marin, which art under us, to sail with us to the gold garden of Herspes." And this command was not neglected by the Conch, as it was its custom, for it sailed forever in its career upon the tops of the green-sided waves, straight across all abysses, until it reached the harbour and shoreport in the islands of Histhrus. And upon their arriving there, Brian asked his brothers, "In what way do you desire to approach the garden? Now, for I think," he said, "the royal champions and warriors of the country are always guarding it, and with the king himself as chief over them." "What should we do?" said his other brothers, "but make direct to attack them and carry the apples away from them, or fall ourselves in the attempts? It is not fated us to escape these dangers which impede over us without dying in some place." "Instead of that," said Brian, "we should prefer that our fame and our renown should be proclaimed aloud upon us, and that our cunning and valor should be recanted after us, rather than the folly and cowardness should not be charged aloud upon us. And according to the best counsel for us to take on this occasion is to go in the shape of a strong, swift hawks towards this garden. And its guardians have nothing but their light of massive weapons to cast at us, and take care that these pass you by with agility and full activity. And when they have known what they have ready and fit to be thrown, descend ye upon the apples, and carry off each man an apple of them. And, if I can, I shall take 2 apples with me. That is, an apple in my talons, an apple in my mouth." Then they plotted his counts, and Brian struck them with a transforming Druidical wand. Each of the 3 then transformed into a beautiful and wonderful hawks. And they went forth towards the apples, and the garden party perceived them. And they shouted upon all sides of them, and they threw angry poisonous showers of weapons at them. And these were upon their guard, as Brian had charged them, until the guarding party had cast all their massive weapons, and they had stepped down upon the apples courteously. And Brian carried off 2 apples from them, and each man in the other 2 apples. And he returned safely without bleeding or red wounding. And this news spread through the city and through the land in general. The king had 3 cunning, wise daughters, and they put themselves into shapes of 3-taloned osprey, and they pursued the hawks into the sea. And they let fly shafts of lightning after them and before them, and the lightnings were scorching them greatly. "Pity the condition that we are in now," said the children of Tuirenn, "for being scorched by these lightnings, if we do not obtain some relief." "If I could," said Brian, "I would give you some relief." And he struck himself with a transparent Druidical wand, and also his 2 brothers, and turned them into 2 swans, and himself into another swan. And they started to dart out into the sea, and Osprey went away from them to then, and the children of Tuirenn went to their coach. After they resolved in council to go to Greece to seek the skin of the pig, by consent or by force, they went forward until they came near the court of the king's Greece. In what shape should we go into this place? Said Brian. In what shape should we go in there? The other said, son, but in our own shapes. It is not so as it appears best to me, said Brian, but to go in the shape of poets and professional men of Tuirenn, for it is thus our honor and respect will be greater among the nobles of Greece. That is hard for us to do, they said, for when we have no poem and as little to do know how to compose one. However, they put the Thai poets in their hair. They struck the door of the court, and the doorkeeper asked them who was there. We are professional poets from Tuirenn, said Brian, who have come with a poem to Titus the king. And the doorkeeper therefore went to inform the king that there were poets from Tuirenn before the door. Let them be admitted, he said, for it is in search of a good patron that there has come so far from their own country to this. And the king commanded that their court shall be put in proper order to receive them. And they might be able to stay, that there seemed no place as grand as it in all their travels. The children of Tuirenn were admitted, then in the shape of men of poetry, and they fell to drinking and merrymaking at once. And they thought there was not the world that they had ever seen a court so good as that, nor a household so numerous, nor they met with such warm attention as themselves. Then arose the king's men of poetry to sing their lays and poetry before the people. And then Brian, son of Tuirenn, dressed as his brothers to sing a poem for the king. We have no poem, said they, and do not you require of us anything but the art that are of ever placed, namely to take by force or arms whatever is wanting us. But if we're stronger and they are stronger, to fall by them. It's not a happy mode of composing a poem, said Brian, upon the horse and feet request attention until he himself sung a poem, and he was listened to and said, O King Titus, we counsel not thee fame, we praise thee as an oak above the kings. The skin of pig bounty whereas hardness, this is the reward which I ask for it. The war of a neighboring against the Ar, and as far as the Ar is a neighbor against him. He who gives us his property, his court shall not be scarcer for it. A stormy host and a raging sea, our dangerous power, should one oppose it. The skin of a pig bounty will through hardness, and this is the reward I ask, O Titus. That is a good poem, said the king, but I don't understand a word of it in sense. I shall tell thee in sense, said Brian. O Titus, I counsel not thy fame. We praise thee as an oak above the kings. That is the same way an oak excels the king of trees in the woods. That is in a way you excel the kings of the world for the bounty and nobility and generosity. The skin of a pig bounty, where without hardness, that is the skin of the pig, O Titus, which thou hast, which I should wish to get from thee as reward for my poetry. And the war of the neighbor against the Ar is the far Ar is the neighbor against him. That is the same as ear, and those shall be ear to ear. That is the ears without each for the skin. And if I do not get it from thee with consent, to that is the sense of my poem refuses, said Baranatarm. I should praise thee poem, said king, if my pig skin had not been so mentioned in it. And is not wise of thee, O man of poetry, he said, to ask that request of me, for I would not give it to all poets and professional men. And the best and the greatest noble of world, since they would not be able to take it against my consent from me. And I shall not give 3 fulls of that skin of the red gold to thee as the price of thy poem, and I shall give 3 folds of the skin of the red gold for thee as the price of the poem. May all good be thine, O king, said Brian. And I know it was not easy to make the request, but thou should receive a good ransom for it. However, I am not convidious that I shall not take less than I have the gold measured well faithfully by the skin. The servants and attendants of the king were sent with them to the treasure house to measure the gold. Measure 2 skins out of it to my brothers first, said Brian, and the last full faithfully to myself, since it was I who made the poem. But upon the skin brought out, Brian was made Kinderus, swift-handed, snatched at it with his left hand, and at the same time he bared his swords and dealt the stroke to the men nearest to him. And he made 2 parts with him in the middle, and took possession of the skin, and put it around himself, and the 3 sons of Tuirenn rushed out of the court, hewing down the host of whatever they happened to be before them, insomuch that they were noble escaping beyond being slaughtered, not a champion escaped being murdered and mutilated, nor a warrior killed by them. And then Brian went to where the king of Greece himself was. Nor was the king more slow in attacking him and made more valiant champion-like. Hard, brave combat with each other, and the end of his fight was that the king of the Greece fell by the venom of the arm of the Brian, son of Tuirenn. As for the other 2, they killed and slaughtered wildly at the host upon all sides, until they waged indescribable destruction upon the hosts of the court, until they quite subdued them, after which they were mined for 3 days and 3 nights in that court to put off the fatigue after their labor and their great slaughter. And the 3 champions held the choicest of the ladies in the palace as his arms, and the bed of champions as long as they remained there. And then, determined upon going to seek for more than a fine, his brothers asked Brian where they should go first. We should go to the king of Persia, said Brian, to seek the spear. And they went forward towards the crush, and they left the blue streamy confines of Greece. We are well off, and we have the apples and the skin. And they made no delay until they reached the land of Persia. In what shape shall we go to the court of the king of Persia? In what shape shall we go there but our own shape? Said the sons. It is not what appears to me, but go there in the shape of poets, as we went to the king of Greece. We approve of that, they said, because the success of which had brought them last time, we took poetry, not that it is easy for us to assume the profession that it have not, but they put on ties of poets upon their hair, and came to the door of the court and asked to have it opened. The doorkeeper asked who they were, and of what country. We are the poets from Tuirenn, they said, who have come with a poem to the king. They were admitted and made welcome by Pircer, the king, and nobles of his household, and they were seated with honor and distinction by the king around himself. And the king's poet arose and sang their lays, their songs, and their fine poems. And Brian, son of Tuirenn, called upon his brothers to arise and sing a poem for the king. Do not ask for the art which we have not from us, they said, but if you wish it, we shall exercise the art in which it acquired, namely mainly striking and beating. That will be a rare excuse for poetry, said Brian. And as it is myself, I have the poem which I shall sing for the king. And he delivered his address. Small the esteem of any spear with King Pircer. The battles of foes are broken, no oppression to Pircer, everyone whom he wounds. A yew tree, the finest of wood, it is called king without oppression. May the splendid shaft drive upon yon crowd into the wombs of death. That's a good poem, said the king, but I do not understand what the mention of my spear in it means. O man of poetry from Tuirenn. It is this, said Brian, son of Tuirenn. That is the reward I should wish to receive for my poem. It is the very spear which you have. It is unwise you asked for the gift of me, said the king. And, besides, the nobles of high personage never give a greater honor than the protection for a poem that has not caused thy death until this spot. When Brian heard this language from the king, he bethought him of the apple which he held in his hand, and he made successful cast at the king and struck him with the flesh to his forehead, so that he drove his brain out the back and pole of his head. And he bared the sword and fell to hewing down upon the hosts around him. And this was not neglected by the other two brothers, and they fell, helping him bravely and vigilantly until slaughter was made of all who encountered the people of the court. And they had the women and the princesses of the great court at their disposal, and they found the spear with a cauldron of water around its blade, in order that the heat should not scorch the people of the court. And after a while the children of Tuirenn said it was time for them to go and seek more of the compensation which was due of them. And they left the court after that, and they asked of each other, in what direction should we go in? We should go to Dober, the king of the island of Sicily, said Brian, for it is he who has the 2 steeds and the chariot which Lugh has demanded of us. They went forward and carried the spear with them, and high were the souls of the 3 champions after that exploit they had performed. They went on until they had arrived at the court of the island of Sicily. In what shape shall we go to this court? Said Brian. What shape should we go in but our own shapes? They said. That's not the proper way, but let's go there in the shape of mercenary soldiers of Tuirenn, and ask to make friendship with the king, for it is that which way we shall obtain knowledge and the whereabouts of the steeds and chariot are kept. And when they demanded upon this counsel, they were forwarded to the green before the king's court. The kings and chiefs and great nobles of his people went out to meet them through the fair assembly in which they'd been held among his people. And the children of Tuirenn made obedience to their king, and the king asked them who they were. We are mercenary soldiers from Tuirenn, they said, who are earning wages from the kings around the world. Do you wish to remain with me for a while? Said the king. We do wish it, they said, according to the entered into an agreement, and made the agreement with the king. And they remained in the court for a fortnight and a month, and they did not see the steeds during that time. And Brian said, this is a bad state of things for us, my beloved brothers, that we've not more account of the steeds now than the first day we came to court. What is it you wish to do then in that case? They said. Let's do this, said Brian. Let us guide down on our arms and over many weapons an array of traveling journeying, and let us go to the presence of the king. And let us tell him that we shall not leave the land and this part of the world unless he shows us steeds. They went forth that day to the presence of the king and asked them, and which was induced them to put themselves into a traveller's array. Thou shalt be informed of that, O high king. It's because the soldiers of Tuirenn, such as we always are, that in guards and confidence of the kings, who have jewels of virtue and victory. And we are accustomed to the repositories of worships and councils, and the secrets of all those by whom we retain. And thou hast not treated us since we come to thee, for thou hast 2 steeds and chariots, the best in the world, according as we have been informed, and we have not seen them. It was ill of you to depart on that account, said the king, when I would have shown them to you on the first day, had I thought you had sought to see them. And since now you seek them, you shall see them. For I think that they never came into this court soldiers of Tuirenn, who were of confidence, and that confidence of the people of this court was greater than in you. He sent for the steeds then, and the chariot was yoked to them. The fleet was cold as the winged spring, and their career running, and the career was equally facet upon the sea, upon the land. And Brian watched the steeds attentively, and suddenly he laid hold of the chariot, and caught the charioteer, and dashed him against the rock of stone that was nearest to him, and killed him. And he himself sprang into its place in the chariot, and made a cast of the spear of Purgras against the king, with clove in his heart and his chest, and the brothers fell upon the host of the court, and slaughtered red slaughter among as many of them as they could. And when they had finished this undertaking, Ursa and Ubr asked where they should go then. We should go to Ezra, the king of pillars of gold, and seek the 7 pigs to which Lugh has demanded from us. And then they sailed onwards without accident, straight away to the noble land, and they found the people of that country on the alert, guarding their harbors from fear of the sons of Tuirenn. For the fame of these skilled champions was heard throughout all the countries of the world. How they had been driven out of the Tuirenn by oppression, and they had carried away with them all the gifted jewels of the world. As the king of pillars of gold came to the verge of the harbor to meet them, and he asked them reproachfully whether it was by them, as they had heard that the kings of the world had fallen in all the countries in which they had been. Brian answered that it was whatever punishment he might make to inflict upon them for it. What is it that caused you to do that? Brian told him that it was oppression and tyrannical sentence from another that drove them to it. And he related to him which had happened, and how they had subdued all they had offered to stand against until the time. What did you come to this country for now? Said the king. For the pigs that you have, to carry them away with us as part of that compensation. In what way would you wish to obtain them? Said the king. If we get them in good will, to accept them with thanks, and if we do not, give battle to you and your people on their account, that you should fall by us, and that we carry off the pigs with us despite of you in that way. If that should be the end of it, said the king, it will be evil of us to fight the battle. It would be indeed, said Brian. And then the king went to his council and whispered with all his people in the council, which they gave was to give the pigs to their own will to the sons of Tuirenn. Since they could not see that he was stood in any place they'd been come to at this time. The children of Tuirenn therefore expressed their gratitude and thanks, and their wonder was greater of having obtained the pigs in that way, seeing that they have not obtained any other part of the fine without battle, but these are not alone, but that they had left so much of their blood in every place throughout which they passed until then. Ezra took with him to his court a royal residence that night, and they were supplied with food and drink, and soft beds and utmost desires arose the following day and came to the king's presence, and the pigs were given to them. It is well that thou hast given us these pigs, for we have not obtained any part of the fine without battle, but these alone. And Brian spoke this poem. These pigs, O Ezra, thou shalt have us with grace, and thou other treasures which we have obtained, we took the right of hard combats. We get fast for a battle, and in which fell many champions, until we took away from him the yew that gifted the weapon. And a battle the king of Island of Sicily, that would be impossible to give significant description, we should all have fallen in that array, if not for the skin of that great pig. O Israel, thou whispered treachery, thou hast not whispered treachery. Should the three sons of Tuirenn live, the greater will be their triumph and their renown from the manner in which they has given up these pigs. What journey do you propose to take now, the children of Tuirenn, said Ezra? We go to Tuirenn for the puppy hound, which is there. Grant me a request, O children of Tuirenn, said Ezil. And the request which I ask you is this, to take me along in your company to the king of Tuirenn, because a daughter of mine is his wife, and I wish to prevail upon him to give you the hound without battle and without war. We think well of that, they said, and the kingship prepared for him, and the adventurous on either side, and not further until they reached delightful, wonderful shores of Tuirenn. The hosts of the Munster of Tuirenn were watching their harbors and the shore ports before them, and they shouted at them at once because they knew them. And Ezra went ashore peacefully, and he went to where his son-in-law, the king of Tuirenn, was. And he told them of the adventures of the children of Tuirenn from beginning to end. What brought them to this country? Said the king. For the hound in which you have, said Ezil. And is ill of you thought to come to them from me to this. For the gods have not given any luck to the champions in the world that could not by will or by force obtain my hound. Not so should be, said Ezra. But since many of the kings of the world would have been subdued by these, you'd better give them the hound without fighting and without battle. But all Ezra said was but thrown away to him. And Azar went to where the children of Tuirenn were, and told them these things. According to these answers, they were not neglected by the warriors, but they put quick hands upon their arms, and they challenged the army of Illtyd to battle. And when that brave host had reached their presence, a mighty outrun combat and battle was fought between them on both sides. As for the children of Tuirenn, they hewed down the champions and slew the warriors until they themselves separated from each other in the battle from the violence and fury contest and the hardness of the fight. So Ishtar and Elpern happened to be on one side, and Brian himself on the other. It was a gap of danger and a breach of ranks and broken retreat before Brian in every path that he paused through until he reached the king of Tuirenn in the battle pen in which he was, and the other two champions entered upon single combat and fight. Shouted butterly venomously as theirs was the rightful power, hard striking of one another, and fierce, valorous, unmerciful sledging. And this combat was a brave one, until at last Brian vanquished and bound the king of Illtyd, and brought him to where the centre of the host it reached, until which was Aziel. There is thy son-in-law for thee, and I swear by my arms of valor that I think it would be easier to kill him 3 times than to bring him here once to thee this way. However, the end that was the hound was given to the children of Tuatha, and the king was unbound, and the peace and unity was made between them. And after finishing all things in this way, they took leave of Azrael and of all the rest in like manner. And now, to return to Lu. And it was revealed to him that the children of Tuirenn had obtained all things that were wanting to himself against the battle Maer Torga. Upon which he sent a Druidical spell after them for the purpose of putting them into forgetfulness and want of reconciliation of what they had not obtained of the fine. And he inspired them with a mind and a great desire to return to Erin with the fine to Lu, because of truth they did not recount what part of the fine was still wanting of them. And they came onwards to the career into Tuirenn, and place at which Lu was at the time was an affair, and assembled along the king of Erin and the queen of Tara. And the children of Tuirenn came ashore, and Burgan na Boran was revealed to Lu that he had left the assembly secretly and went to Carshcorwin, which was called Tara. And he closed the gates of Tara behind him, and he arrayed himself in Manon's noble suit, namely man's smooth Greek armor, and the cloak of the daughter of Findus, and his arms of valor of that out. And the children of Tuirenn came to where the king was, and they were made welcome by the king and all the Tuatha de Danna, and the king inquired of them if they obtained the compensation. We have obtained it, they said. And where is Lu that we may deliver it to him? He was here a while ago, said the king, and the fair assembly was searched for him, but he was not found. I know where he is, said Brian. For it has been revealed to him that we have come to Erin, having these poisoned arms with us, and he has gone to Tara to avoid us. And the messengers were sent after him, and the answer that he gave the messengers who went after him was that he would not come, but that the fine should be given to the king of Erin. And the sons of Tuirenn did this, and the king having guarding the fine, they all went to the palace of Tara, and Lu came out then upon the lawn, and his fine was given to him, and this is what he said. There never was killed, and there never will be killed, anyone whose full compensation is not here. However, their residue, namely the residue of the fine which the cockpit spit, and the 3 shouts upon the hill which you have not given. When the sons of Tuirenn heard this, they fell swoon and faintless, and they left their fair assembly, and went to the house of the father at night, and told him of their adventures, and how Lu behaved to them. When the sons of Tuirenn heard this, they fell swoon. Gloom and grief seized upon Tuirenn, and they spent the night together. And the next day they went to their ship. And Tuirenn, the daughter of Tuirenn, went along with them. And the maiden fell grief-crying, in lamentation, and she spoke this lay. Alas for this, O brine of my soul, that thy progress leads not to Tuatha. After all thy troubles in Erin, though I not follow thee, thou salmon of the Slight of Boran, the salmon of the stream of Lithri, since I cannot detain thee, I am loath to separate from thee. Though horseman of the wave of Tuirenn, though man lasting in combat, shall thus return as I hope, it shall not be pleasant for you, thy foe. Do ye pity the sons of Tuirenn? Upon the elbows of their green shields, the ghastly heist and disturbed my mind. Their despair is a cause of pity. That you are this night at Brine Ether, your party who would have increased your grief, your champions to whom valor has bestowed, until the early morning comes. Pity your journey of Tara, and pity from Tiltu, the pleasant plains, and great Usul and Mena. There is not an event more pitiful. After this poem, they went forth in the tremendous waves of the green sea, and they were in 1/4 of a year upon the sea without having gained any intelligence of the land. And Brian put the water jes in his transparent glass upon his head, and he made the water leap, and said that he was a fortnight walking in salt water, seeking the island of Frobisher, and found it at last. And when they searched his court, upon the court found only the troop of women engaged in embroidery and border making, and among the other things they had happened to have the cooking spit. When Brian saw it, he took it in his hand, and he was going to carry it with him towards the door. Each of the women burst into laughs, seeing that act, and said, Bold is thy deed thou hast put into my hand for. For if the 2 brothers were along with thee, the last valorous of the thrice 50 women of us here would not let the spit go without thee or them. However, take one of the spits with thee, since thou hast the heroism attempt to take the desperate from us. Brian took leave of them and went forth to seek his ship. And his brothers thought it too long that Brian had been away from them, and just as they proposed to depart, it was they saw him coming towards him, and they greatly raised their spirits. And he went to his ship, and they went to seek the hill of the madden. And they went arrival upon the hill, the guardian at the top towards him, and Brian saw him, he attacked him. And the fight of these 2 champions was like the rapidity of 2 bears, and lacerations of 2 lions, until Merchan fell in the combat. Merchan's 3 sons then came out to fight the sons of Tuirenn. And after Merchan himself previously fallen by Brian, if anyone should come from the island of Hirspurst in the east of the world to look at the fight, those heroes have ought to come in greatness of their blows, and lively in their spirits and strength of their minds. And these are the names of those sons of Merchan, namely, Corec Con Adr. And they drove their spears into the bodies of the sons of Tuirenn. However, this did not produce fear or weakness in the sons of Tuirenn, for they drove their own 3 spears to the bodies of the sons of Merchan, and they fell into a trance and unconsciousness and death. After these mighty deeds, Brian, what state are you in, my beloved brothers? We are dead, they said. Let us arise, he said, for I perceive signs of death approaching us. Let us give the shouts upon the hill. We are not able to do that, they said. But Brian arose then, and raised one of them each hand, with his blood flowed close until they raised 3 shouts. After this, Brian put with him to the ships, and they continued to tread in the sea for a long time. But at last, Brian said, I see Bryn Ether, Don Torg, and the Tara of Kings. We should be full of health, could we but see these, said one of them. And for the love of thy honor, O brother, raise your heads to the breast of the other, that we may see Erin. And we care not which receive thee, death or life afterwards. And they spoke a lay, and Brian answered, Take these hands upon thy breast, O Brian, thou sons of generous red-armed Tuirenn, thou torch of valor without guile. They went to many land, may see the land of Erin. Upon the breast, upon thy shoulder, these heads upon the mighty champion, that they may from the water see Uthric, Tiltu, and Tara. At Carrac the smooth Brug, and these, Firmin Turkruk along with them, the plain of Lithri, the dew of Magbrug, and the mountains about the fair green Tiltu. Could I but see Bran Tuatha from me, and Dun Tuirenn in the north, welcome death from that out. Though it should be suffering death, I pity these brave sons of Tuirenn. Birds could fly through my two sides, and it is not so much my two sides that stricken me, as to think of you unlikewise to have fallen. We should prefer death to take us, O Brian, son of Tuirenn, who fled not, than see thee with wounds upon thy body, and no physician to cure thee. Since we have not to heal our wounds, Mecra Ogran Dorfin, alas, O Brian, discreto gel, to have given away us the skin. After that, they reached Ben Irchaf. From that, they went on to Dunturin, and said to Tuirenn, Go, beloved father, to Tara, and deliver this cooking spit to Lugh, and bring us the gifted skin to relieve us. And Brian spoke the lay, and Tuirenn answered, O Tuirenn, depart from us, to speak to Lugh, and gifted catch him asleep in the south. Beg the healing skin from him through friendship. For the world's jewels, south and north, have all given to Lugh and gifted. You are certainly what come of it would be your graves and your burial. Ne'er are we relieved in blood and flesh to Lugh, the son of Keren, son of Jeskant. Let him not deal us wrath for wrath, though we've killed his father. O Father, beloved, noble, swift, be long upon thy visit. Be not long upon thy visit, for thou as art, thou shalt not find us alive before thee. After this, Tuirenn went forward to Tara and found Lugh before him, and he gave him the split and begged the skin from him to cover his sons with. And Lugh said he would not give it. And Tuirenn turned back to his sons and told them that he had not obtained the skin. And Brian said, Take me with you to Lugh, to try if I should obtain the skin. It was done accordingly, and he went to Lugh and begged the skin from him. And Lugh said he would not give it, and that though he'd give it to him beneath the earth of gold, and he would not accept it from him unless he thought their death would ensue, in revenge for the death of which they had perpetrated. When Brian heard this, he went to where his two brothers were, and lay down between them, and his life departed out from him. And out of the other two at the same time the Tuirenn made the following lay over his sons. Grieved is my heart over you, you three fair youths who fought many fights. After your activity and your feats, it were well for me that you should live. The makings of two kings over Danna, Isher and Epher, Brian that conquered Greece. It is a loss that their like are not alive. I am Tuirenn without strength. Over your grave, you fierce champions, as long as ships play the sea. So long shall I not write lay or song more. After this, Tuirenn dropped on his bodies of the sons, and gave his soul departed out of him. And they were buried at once in one grave. And such is the tragical fate of the children of Tuirenn. Join me tomorrow when we hear of the wooing of Ethan in the same saga of the stories of the Tuatha Day.